Before we get into today's episode, I want to thank a couple sponsors that we were able to secure for this season, season 5 of the Scuttlebutt. It's exciting to be able to get sponsors for this. We're really thankful for them. The first one, you might have heard them already, is D&D Metal Recycling and Auto Salvage. The Scuttlebutt's been pairing with D&D for quite some time. D&D began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s and has grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. These are state-of-the-art scrap yards with deep roots in the community and a strong commitment to the service of their customers. D&D accepts all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D, that's D and D, autosalvage.com. Thank you, D&D, for supporting this podcast. Been wonderful collaborating with you, and we're looking forward to being with you all through season 5 here. We'd also like to thank a new sponsor for the Scuttlebutt, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. Tobacco-Free Adagio Health is dedicated to preventing and reducing tobacco use and increasing education about tobacco hazards and secondhand smoke. Of course, the best way to be tobacco-free is to never start. And we'll be sharing more about the many programs offered by Tobacco-Free Adagio Health in the future. You can check out more of their work at tobaccofree.adagiohealth. It's ADAGIO health.org. Tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. Really excited to have sponsors on board for the Scuttlebutt, and I hope you enjoy this upcoming episode.
I think a lot of people, when they hear the American Red Cross, they think about disasters. Sometimes they may think of blood or health and safety, but you don't hear too much about our Service to the Armed Forces program.
Welcome, everyone, to the Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Shaun Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. I myself am not a veteran, and I've really been loving what we do here on the Scuttlebutt, which is trying to understand military culture from a civilian perspective. So we dabble in a lot of different military topics, and I thought it would be a good idea to reach out to the local American Red Cross chapter, as they do have a program called Service to the Armed Forces. Now, the American Red Cross, they help people to prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters, big and small. And each year they provide assistance following more than 2,200 area disasters, most of which are home fires. Their mission is to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies by mobilizing the power of volunteers and the generosity of donors. Pauline Duncan, the regional manager of the Greater Pennsylvania region, will be joining us to talk about her role with the Red Cross, more about the mission, and more about the service to the armed forces and how the armed forces and the American Red Cross sort of collaborate and work together, how they help veterans out and active military. I thought this would be a great opportunity for the Scuttlebutt to kind of dive into what the roles and responsibilities are of the Red Cross when it comes to the armed forces. So I hope that you enjoy this episode. And if you're new to us, please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube so you are the first to know whenever we release new episodes every Monday. And please drop me a line, Shaun, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any thoughts or comments, questions, concerns, any of that stuff, really love to hear from our audience. Thank you again for watching and for being a supporter of the podcast. Enjoy the episode.
My name is Pauline Duncan. I am the regional manager for Service to the Armed Forces and International Programs for the American Red Cross, Greater Pennsylvania. I've been with the Red Cross for 22 years, and started in disaster services and had a little bit of military and international programming, and probably within the last 10 years, just full military and international programs. So, yeah.
So as we were saying, we were talking here that this history goes back 140 years. And, in the Scuttlebutt, we usually only talk with, veterans. But I think it's interesting. Both of us are civilians. Both of us have a passion for veterans, obviously. And can you give us a bit of a background of how these two organizations have intersected?
Yes, absolutely. Like I mentioned, earlier, I come from a military family.
Mhm.
I haven't served myself, but I have brothers and sisters that served for a number of years, Army and one Marine Corps.
How did those two get along?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. You can see the difference for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we said, the Red Cross was started over like 140 years ago on the battlefield, which is very interesting. It started, with Clara Barton.
Mhm.
She had saw with what Henry Dunant was doing overseas, and he had already started the International Committee of the Red Cross. And how that was started was he just was on a business trip, Swiss businessman on a business trip, and ran into a conflict between what was it, the Swiss and the French? Don't let me get this mixed up. But anyway, there was conflict, and he gathered up, some of the locals as volunteers to help, the wounded and sick. And that's pretty much how the Red Cross got started. Clara Barton heard of what he was doing, wanted to know more about it, visited, met with him, and started the American Red Cross. So it's kind of interesting.
Very, very. So the Red Cross, like, there's different chapters all across the country. Maybe give us an overview of just like where the Red Cross is now.
Oh my goodness, yes, there's Red Cross everywhere. Anywhere you could go, there's a Red Cross office, trust me. Here, just in our region, we call them regions, and then we have divisions.
Mhm.
We're Northeastern Division, and our Northeastern Division covers from Pennsylvania all the way up to like Boston, Connecticut, New York, and all those areas. And then Greater Pennsylvania covers 61 counties.
Mm.
61 counties. So being a regional manager, that's how many counties I cover. So we have 8 chapters within our county, within our region. And then there's Southeastern PA, which is Philly. They have like I think 3 counties, 3 or 4 counties out of Pennsylvania. So yeah, there's a lot of Red Cross chapters and, regions and divisions. They're all divided up. I don't know exactly all of them, but
And obviously, you guys have been very busy. We'll get into this in a little bit with the pandemic, but the Red Cross is pretty much there to respond to disasters and provide relief for that. So when you say division, like it's all sort of comes down like almost a domino effect. Like everybody is covered in some way if there were to be some disaster at some place in the United States.
oh yes, absolutely. And all of us, within our regions, divisions, chapters, we all have like a responsibility when it comes to disasters. So we all have like a job that we do. So for instance, I do military and international programs, but when there's a large disaster, one of my job or volunteer that I do is reunification. So I would be deployed to wherever that disaster is. It could be anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world for that matter. And I would make sure that families are connected. They may
Hmm.
have lost contact, so I would try to make sure that those families are reconnected, or reunited some kind of way. So, for instance, when there was I went to help with the floods a few years ago down in Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas.
Yeah.
Families were separated because, they had to evacuate. They had to leave their home and they were displaced. So they were in shelters and family members didn't know where they were. So it was just a matter of, we had boots on the ground that would go and knock on doors or try to check with neighbors or check with, the shelters that we had set up or that we supported. And we would check to see if those family members were there to make that connection back. So disasters happen every day, everywhere. And we do have teams of volunteers and staff that help and that when we're needed, for sure. Yeah.
I imagine that the Red Cross is like the biggest volunteer organization on the planet. Like you guys pretty much run completely off volunteer support almost, right?
Yes, we do. That's the thing. That's the beauty of it. Our volunteers are the ones that do a lot of the work for sure. We as staff just pretty much support them. Get them all the items that they need to pretty much do whatever's needed. But yeah, we're definitely a volunteer-led organization for sure.
Were you a volunteer before you came on with the Red Cross as an employee?
No, I was not. No. And the funny thing about that, when I actually joined the Red Cross in 2000, yeah, I guess it was 2000.
Mhm.
I actually thought that you had to swim. That's how much I knew about the Red Cross. I'm like, oh, I don't know how to swim.
You can join the Navy and not know how to swim, so.
It's just so funny. I was just like, I don't know why that was. I just thought I had to swim. I mean, and we do have those classes. We do have swim classes where we train lifeguards, but
Yeah.
I didn't have to learn that.
So why did you decide to join the Red Cross? What drew you to the organization?
The mission really drew me. It really drew me to alleviate human suffering in the face of disasters. I mean, how could you not be drawn to that mission, to help? And I think that's always what I wanted to do. And, in my life, I went to college and I studied psychology. And after college, I worked for, I worked for a Department of Human Services for a little bit. And then, when I found that the Red Cross was, of immediate needs, whereas when I was working with Department of Human Services, it was like long, drawn out. And I liked helping, immediately being there. We're not first responders. Like I said, I started in disaster services as a caseworker. We're not first responders, but I think I would say that we're probably at least third or fourth responder.
Yeah.
The first responders are usually the fire department, the other Salvation Army supports the fire department. And then, they're calling the Red Cross to help, the family that's displaced. So
Right.
It kind of drew me. Yes.
It's very interesting. And then you have to complement those first responders in some way. Whenever you come in, it's almost like you see in the movies how the cops come in and they're like, this isn't your jurisdiction. But really, like the Red Cross, like you guys have to come in and sort of work with them. And how does that interchange work?
Yeah, it's pretty smooth. It's pretty smooth. They know that the Red Cross is there to come and help the families. Like I said, a lot of times the Salvation Army, they're supporting the firemen and women. So they're supplying, if there's, beverages or refreshments they need to give, they're helping the families as well. And even until we get there, they might be supplying them with a blanket or whatever. And then once the Red Cross gets there, we're making contact with the fire chief, finding out who the fire victims are and meeting with them and trying to meet their needs. If it's, putting them up for a couple of days, until they can figure out their next steps, or providing, clothing or, food or whatever their immediate need is, we're going to help with that at that time. Yep. And sometimes we're called by, by the fire department, or we could even be called by the Salvation Army saying, hey, we got a family here that's had a fire and are displaced, and they're calling and letting us know so we can get there.
It's interesting. I'm thinking like you mentioned that your brothers and sisters have all served. It seems like you have like a family of service, including yourself. And how did that come about?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I come from a small town here in Western Pennsylvania, and very, very small. And one of the things you did, you either went to the military or you found a job and went somewhere, or you went to college. So, that was the steps that my brothers and sisters took. They wanted to join the military, they wanted to serve and, and provide for our country and serve. So that's what they did. But when it came to me, and I have a twin brother, when it came to us, we decided we wanted to go to college.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was enough of us that went to the military, and so we was just like, yeah, we'll go to college and see what that's all about.
We always ask this with the VBC, but what did your parents think of everyone joining the military?
They were fine with that. They were definitely fine with that. Yep. They really liked that. That was something that my brothers and sisters or my siblings chose to do, and supported them no matter what.
That's awesome. Now going back to this idea, like alleviating human suffering, like, and also with the idea of complementing first responders, thinking about that sort of what you do with your title of service to the armed forces, what is that like? How do you support the armed forces, and how does that interchange work out?
Oh, so how we support the military, the armed forces, is Wow, we do a lot for we do a lot of programming, which makes me excited. I'm always super excited to talk about the programs that we offer. And we still do what we did like over 140 years ago, making that connection with families. So if a service member is deployed overseas or anywhere outside of their home and there's an emergency here at home, the families will call us and we will verify that emergency and deliver it to wherever that service member is stationed, anywhere in the world. And we always tell the family members, make sure you have their information, because that's what we're going to ask for. We're going to ask where they're stationed, what unit they belong with, and then we're going to verify that emergency with a verifying official and make sure that's delivered in a timely manner. So we always reach out to the families to let them know what we do ahead of time. So if an emergency happens, they have that information, because that can delay getting that message delivered to wherever that service member is stationed.
Is it just a message, or can it be gift boxes or different needs?
We do messages, emergency messages. And so we deliver that emergency message so the military can make that decision. We do not make that decision if they come home or not. The military makes that decision, but we just deliver it for them. I mean, they have more than enough things to do to then, really worry about trying to gather all this information. So we kind of just gather it all for them and verify for them so they can make that decision if there's going to be leave or not.
Can you give me an idea of a recent one that maybe was approved and how that process worked?
We have a lot of, they're pretty common, the ones that we usually get. It's usually like a death of a family member, and it's usually an immediate family member. So like the parents, a sibling, grandparents. We can do aunt and uncle if there's an extenuating circumstance. That means if they raise that service member as their own child because their parents are available, but we do not do like extended family member. And so what that looks like, we might have mom call us and say, hey, my son or daughter is in the military and his or her father passed away. And I want to get them home. I need to get them home. So, our volunteer or call center worker will ask them, all the preliminaries, what happened, who can they reach to verify that emergency. And then they'll also ask the parent, what's the service member's information, where are they stationed, and once they gather all of that, they will call wherever that service member is stationed and deliver that message. They'll deliver it to the command, and the command will make sure that the service member gets that message. The family will sometimes request that a chaplain be available to, deliver that message to that service member.
Like a military chaplain working with the...
Yes. So if there's a military chaplain available, they will be there to deliver that message to the service member. And we also have staff that's deployed overseas with the military. So that's an interesting part. We do have... Yes, we do have Red Cross staff that's there wherever the military is stationed. So we have, Red Cross in different countries that will help with delivering the message. They help with building morale for the men and women serving. Yeah, there's Red Cross stations all over.
How do they help build morale?
They get sometimes, like you have mentioned, do we send care packages? So they would be the ones that would receive care packages from other offices or just people who want to send care packages, and they make sure that the servicemen and women get them. They also offer like courses and classes where they can learn CPR, first aid, resiliency. We have resiliency courses that are taught also on a military installation. So they just do a variety of different things to try to, just build that morale and just, give them a little taste of home. Sometimes they're helping with, serving food or for the holidays, and they'll have like a little parties and stuff just to make it seem like home, even though they're, in another country. Yeah.
How long is a deployment like that with the Red Cross?
So a deployment, depending. So it's in like a high active zone, like maybe like Kuwait or Afghanistan or something like that. Those deployments could be like 6 months. They'll get trained with the military. Like the Red Cross will go to usually Fort Benning, Georgia, or something like that, and do training alongside with the military, and then be deployed for a 6-month stint. Then we do have staff that are there for like 3 or 4 year rotations.
Wow.
Yeah.
And they don't come out of that being considered a veteran, but I mean, if you're within those bases, you're in a pretty kinetic area to begin with.
Exactly. We have like staff that are they're deployed overseas, and some are like in Italy and different places, and they do Hawaii or whatever, and they could do like 4-year rotations. So they're there for 4 years, and then they'll see what's their next location they're going to. So yeah.
I did not know about this. This is really fascinating. Who would decide that that's what they want to do? But I guess if you could be deployed to Hawaii, not a bad thing.
Exactly. I sometimes I see that up, and I'm like, could I go to Hawaii? I mean, it would be similar to what I'm doing here stateside. You would do, but you do a little bit more because you encompass all of the programs. So you would be the person who would do disaster drills. You'd be the person that would be trained to do CPR and first aid classes. You would be the person to help with the blood. So you're encompassing all of our departments in one on a military installation.
Interesting. So this is involved with active military. So how do you help transitioning soldiers transition back to civilian life? Is there any programs for that? And then do you also work with veterans?
So yes, we have our resiliency workshops that we offer. And we know that the military has resiliency workshops too, that that's, I guess, mandatory for the servicemen, men and women to take. And then we have ours. So it's, we try to push ours, but they're going to take the mandatory, and not want to and not want any additional ones. But ours, I think, are kind of complementary to the military resiliency workshops. They're not like, it's not all PowerPoints and slides and all that. It's really like in person, really like almost like set up in groups or whatever. Not so much in person now because of what's going on, but we do run, we still run our resiliency workshops through like Zoom and Teams, but the workshops are really nice. Those are good for transitioning military members. We have workshops to help them deal with stress solutions, communication, dealing with children, their family, because, they're coming back. They've been in the military for how long, and just trying to adapt and transition back home. So our resiliency workshops kind of like hone in on those types of things that's going to help them build that relationship back. And also on the flip side, it's going to help the family, be able to communicate with that service member coming home. They've been in the military all this time, and so it's the husband or the wife or the children, they got to get used to mom and dad or whomever being back home. So we offer those resiliency workshops to kind of help with that.
Wow. So take me through you've had a long career with the Red Cross, but over the last couple of years, obviously with the pandemic, a lot of things shifted and changed, I'm sure. But the Red Cross has still very much been, at the forefront. You've heard a lot about volunteers and first responders and giving blood and setting up, checks like testing clinics, things like that. I don't know how much the Red Cross may be a part of that, but how has the Red Cross sort of refashioned itself to be able to handle this crisis, which is nationwide, worldwide, really, but very much bigger than Hurricane Katrina?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've had to pivot, in our offering or in response. Like I don't work in disaster services, but I still get the emails that tell me if there was a fire last night and what's going on. So I like to keep that my foot in there in the door, so to speak, just to know what's going on, and I should, because people can ask me questions about it. But I know for disaster services, some of the things that they had to do was just different ways of responding. You might have to respond where you're not, the volunteers would meet here at the office and leave in one vehicle all together and go to the disaster scene. So they might now just go in 2 separate vehicles just because of COVID, with the pandemic going on and stuff like that. Wear masks, and just things like that, and just meeting with the clients. They're still responding and they're still meeting with the clients, but it's just, a little bit different that they might be able to respond and keep themselves safe and the clients safe as well. The other thing, when this happened, I noticed I did virtual deployment for a flood. I think it was in New Orleans when the pandemic happened. And a lot of
deployment. So that's really what it turned into, is virtual deployments. Okay.
Exactly. It turned into virtual deployments. They've limited the boots on the ground, so to, because, the boots on the ground could be, there's so many different jobs to be done on the ground, and volunteers. There's volunteers that are doing financial stuff. There's volunteers that are doing logistics. There are volunteers that are, just doing reunification like I do. There's volunteers that are doing casework. So it all had to be like limited. And the ones that were needed to be on the ground were on the ground. The ones that could do virtual were doing virtual. So, you were just calling in and just trying to do this virtually from your home, which was quite interesting.
Yeah, and I'm sure very challenging. How do you fit a volunteer with which service? Is it based on their history and their experience, or is it something that they can be trained for?
Well, both. They can be trained, and a lot of times volunteers, we get a lot of retirees or people that retire. They don't want to do the same thing they did in their job for the last 20, 30 years. They want something different. And we tell them, they can be trained for any disaster function that we have. And let me tell you, we have tons of them, especially in disaster. We have, like I said, different ones from every walk of life. Somebody could find their niche at the Red Cross, for sure.
So, so when I retire, I can still get that Hawaii deployment.
Yes, you can get trained. You can get trained, and you can get that deployment. The lovely thing about it is, like, no matter where you get trained, what Red Cross office, it follows you. So you could be here, you could be trained here in Pittsburgh and do disaster and do military programming, and your family is decided to move to California. And you want to go and live, and work in California, you can start volunteering at the office. Your records just get transferred to the closest Red Cross office, and you can get started right away.
So I'm going to talk a bit about sort of the double-edged sword of this, is that being a volunteer, that you might have to go into some of these more difficult areas. What is the danger level?
The danger level, Sue, all our volunteers are trained of what to expect. And and of course there's a health record that you have to be pretty much in good health to be able to be deployed and do these types of things, and they're covered by the Red Cross, so if something would happen. But we take safety serious. So
of course,
the same thing that we would be protected and make sure that we're safe is the same thing with the volunteers. So I mean, it could be going to a disaster scene, just making sure that you have your you're dressed for it, you have your hard hat, if not, whatever. A lot of times they're not going into the home, they're meeting the client. So it's just taking those necessary steps to make sure to think about your safety first. And they're made aware of what what it could be. Sometimes being deployed, we're being deployed and helping, and for a hurricane or whatever, you're staying in a shelter too, and you're sleeping on cots. So you need to know these types of things before you go. You're not going to be in a comfy hotel.
No, definitely not. What is the difference between sort of Red Cross at the community level, the state level, national level?
That's a good question. That's a good question. So I guess at the community, here at the local level, like I said, we have our regions, we have our divisions, and then we have chapters within those. But they all pretty much report up to headquarters, and our national headquarters is in Washington, D.C. So Washington, D.C. is the hub of the American Red Cross. So all the guidance, everything comes down from them to our divisions, to our regions, and then to the local chapters. So that's pretty much all I can tell you about that.
How have volunteer numbers been over the last couple of years with the pandemic? Have they stayed pretty consistent?
I think the beginning of the pandemic, like anybody else, we did suffer a little bit. It was a little bit slow because, a lot of our programming was in person, face to
Right.
face. Just like even with the military program, we have volunteers that are at the MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing Station. We have volunteers that are doing briefings to family members there, where the men and women, or the kids, I say, are being shipped off for the first time and joining the military, being sworn in. We have briefers that were there and would be briefing the family of Red Cross programs, how to reach us if there's an emergency and things like that. So we had to, the volunteers were no longer there, so we had to think of other ways to be able to get that message to the families, right. So even, just getting new volunteers, it did slow down, volunteers coming in. So we had to think about what positions that we were going to promote that would get volunteers. Like our caseworkers, they're all remote. They're all remote. So they work from home or they work in the office. So that program didn't suffer at all because they were used to not being in the office anyway. So we would just push a lot of our volunteer positions that were like from home or virtual or things like that, to get volunteers. But we did see a slow trickle coming in of volunteers. I couldn't tell you per se how the numbers, because I don't work in that department. We do have a volunteer services department, but our numbers did lag a little bit.
How does one become a volunteer?
So one becomes a volunteer by just, logging onto our website. Our website, www.redcross.org, has everything you would need to know, how to get in touch with your local Red Cross chapter. It's just a matter of putting in your zip code and you're connected with your local Red Cross. And we have volunteers. We have a volunteer services department. We have recruiters that will get your information and just reach you once you register for the Red Cross. So,
and for those of you watching on YouTube, I've pulled up their website, mainly the military families, specifically, I should say, the military families portion of the Red Cross website. And there is right below here. So it's probably as easy as just clicking this, but each year, Red Cross provides more than 471,000 services to service members, veterans, and their families by leveraging a network of some 14,700 volunteers around the world. That's a incredible number. And those services is really what it's saying. Like, services defined means just helping the families.
Absolutely. Like I said, we have a number of programs in our Service to Armed Forces program. We have our caseworkers that are dealing with emergency communication messages. We have them that are dealing with our local community critical care messages, where we have a veteran that might call in that's like, oh, I'm homeless, or I need help with utilities, or this or that. We have caseworkers that are working those cases. And we also have caseworkers that are doing our family contact cards, which is our families that we meet at the MEPS, at the Military Entrance Processing Station. There's caseworkers that will follow up with each of those family members to make sure they know how to reach us if there's an emergency, and make sure they have our brochures and have this information here at hand, and just all of our other programs we share with them to just, if there's a disaster, military family, how to get in touch with us for a disaster or anything. And like I said, we also have our resiliency programs. We have volunteers that we place at the VA hospital. So there's volunteers that they're like dual volunteers. We call them the Red Cross volunteers and also VA volunteers. So they work at the VA hospital and help the staff with some of their programming there. So there's a lot of programs that we try to offer for our families and support them, resources and everything.
We've talked a bit about on the Scuttlebutt previously about homeless veterans, such a big problem in the country. I just noticed you mentioned it. So how can homeless veterans get help through the Red Cross?
A lot of times when we get calls from veterans in the community that are seeking, housing or employment or any type of financial assistance, we try to tap into our local resources. So we'll reach out to a community partner. We don't offer any financial assistance per se, but we also work with military aid societies. So there is a financial assistance, number that retirees or somebody who's been in the military can call to see if they qualify for the military aid society. So we have workers that will gather that information for the military aid societies of each branch and pass it on to them for them to make that decision if they can get, whatever financial assistance that's needed. So a lot of times we'll just work a case and try to connect them with community resources. So we might connect them with other military or veteran programs within a community.
How many cases are you working on currently?
Me, myself, I think I have one case that's in a queue. My volunteers are actually the ones that are working the cases.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have a plethora of volunteers that are sort of just, all have balls in the air.
Oh, yes. We probably work, let me see. It's, what I should have ran those numbers because I'm just thinking we have, how many of our chapters? We have like 8 chapters. Each chapter monthly cases could average between 30 cases. So each chapter a month.
30, so almost like one a day. Like
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the caseworkers are pretty busy. So we're always looking for new caseworkers. They're pretty busy. And when we have our community care cases, which is, like I said, the veterans who might call in for that, those ones could take some time because, we're really trying to see what resources are in the community that can help them, with those types of things. We have, a lot of our, we have a couple caseworkers that are trained to do, grants for some of the, through one of the programs that offers grants. So they'll gather that information for that program from the veteran that's calling in and try to get them, a grant to help with whatever the financial need is for.
Other than volunteering, how can civilians assist the Red Cross, help support the Red Cross?
Oh, always donations.
Yeah. That's the key word, nonprofit.
Nonprofit, yes. We do have our financial services department that, have that look for donations because we are a nonprofit and, we don't receive any other funds. So we're looking to always get donations from the general public to help with the services we offer. Especially, even with disasters happening every day or even sometimes twice or 3 times a day throughout the region, you can imagine how funds can be depleted that fast. So
you bring up a good point, and a lot of it might be, supporting if there's a fire, different disasters. But yeah, if you have, how do you support when there is multiple 3, 4, 5 disasters in a given day? And disasters, it's a big term because we think like Hurricane Katrina is a disaster, but it could be something as local as a fire at a house. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we support locally on a daily basis is a fire, like a home fire. The Red Cross is going to be there to respond. If there's flooding, the Red Cross is going to be there to respond. So that's daily. That there's multiple fires throughout our region daily that I see that we have volunteers going out. Like I said, they'll meet at the local office and then they disperse and go right to where the disaster is and meet with the families.
So a volunteer could potentially, work throughout the entire day at a couple different fires, a couple different disasters, where or you have enough volunteers that are just able to be sort of dispersed throughout the community whenever these hit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They could respond to like 1 or 2 a day, and or if there's one happening at the same time, another backup team could be called in to help, and that's happened before. When I can remember when I was doing disaster services and supporting the volunteers and being on call with a volunteer, we ran like all day long, and we just responded to fire after fire. Sat down and went to eat. Had breakfast, and then we went to the next fire, and then we went to the next one. So it could very well be like that. And that's why we're always looking for volunteers again for disaster services. And, volunteers can be trained for any of our programs.
Awesome. You've been with the Red Cross again for 22 years, but where do you see your career trajectory going? Do you want to continue on working with the armed forces?
I do. I really do. I love what I do. I wouldn't be here for 22 years if I didn't like what I do. And I think, there's just so much that, that I could do. And there's just so much. And I just love helping people, especially military and international. I didn't talk much about our international.
Yeah. Can you lead us through a bit of that?
Yeah. So our international services program is one of our key programs is Restoring Family Links. That's what it's called. And it's, again, connecting families that have been separated due to civil unrest or conflict or disaster in their country. So they may have fled their country and lived in a refugee camp for who knows how long, for a number of years. And they've been, a resettlement agency has got them here to Pittsburgh. So now, they're here in Pittsburgh, and their family who may still be in their country that they left or in the refugee camp has lost contact with them. They can send a Red Cross message to that family member to let them know that they're okay, and where they are. So we kind of make that connection with our international clients.
Has the Red Cross been very involved with when Afghanistan was handed back over to the Taliban?
Yes. Some of the families that have come to Pittsburgh, we've had volunteers and staff help with, just setting up their places that they move to, like help them with furniture and stuff like that. Donations that were given. We've had volunteers help with that.
And that's one thing we did talk about here on the podcast, because it sort of happened while we've been producing the episodes. And it was sort of a side special episode that I recorded about how you can help these refugees that are coming out of Afghanistan that may be getting settled in your city. Is the Red Cross somebody I could call and say, hey, I want to help support any Afghans who have come over? Is there a way to do that?
I think a lot of it comes from the resettlement agencies. Okay. The best is probably to call them and see what the need is and go from there. We're kind of like a support to them. So we're not so much, the go-to person or the contact, but we're supporting them in helping, those families that whatever their needs are. So I would probably say getting in touch with the resettlement agency would be the best way.
And do you take volunteers even for the international services that you provide?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We do take volunteers because we do get cases sometimes where we might receive a Red Cross message from, let's say, the Sudan, and they have a family member here. So we have to deliver that message to that person. So we'll have volunteer caseworkers that will go out and deliver that message to the family. And we have also another program within our international services, our International Humanitarian Law. So we have volunteers that are trained. We have, licensed or not licensed. We have instructors that are trained to kind of teach that to high schools and colleges and things like that, because it's very important to know about the international humanitarian law and the military. The military has that. They learn that as well when they're when they join the military. It's the rules. It's the rules of war.
Yeah. Pauline, this has been really educational. I mean, you sort of get onto the Red Cross website, and I kind of, there's a lot of different things to click on, and there's a national website, and then there's the sort of the more specific local chapter website. But I'm really glad that we got the chance to sit down and sort of dissect a lot of these different things, because you'll see the Red Cross, you see they're sort of there, but I've never really dove into what all of their responsibilities are or what all of their services are, which is really great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. I hope to have you on again, and especially, as you continue on with the armed services portion of your job. Like, I'd love to talk to you more about that and see how it continues to develop, especially through, COVID, as we start to, maybe come out of the pandemic and some of the more services that you've offered start to sprout a little bit more again.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I could talk about our programs all day long.
And thank you to our audience. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube, or connect with me at Shaun, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Or if you have a question for Pauline or would like to connect with the Red Cross, I'd be happy to pass on any information to Pauline as well. Thank you again, Pauline. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.